we know very little of ourselves, our reality, our potential. Especially the mysterious psychedelic compound DMT. DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is a molecule produced within the human brain that is also known to be the most potent psychedelic substance in the world. Groundbreaking research has recently taken place. But before we take that dive, let's explore where it all started. German pharmacologist Otto Louis was the first to discover neuronal communication based on chemical release. He also discovered the first neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. Since then, the classical neurotransmitters were established, such as serotonin, which regulates mood and perception, and dopamine, which plays a role in how we feel pleasure and is a big part of how we think and plan. In 1931, a Canadian chemist named Richard Mansky synthesized an unsuspecting chemical that had been used for visionary and spiritual purposes for thousands of years. In June of 1965, German researchers Franzen and Gross discovered and quantified DMT in human blood and urine. In 1972, Saavedra and Axelrod demonstrated biosynthesis of DMT in mammalian tissues. Throughout the 1960s, scientists attempted to find a link between endogenous DMT and psychotic disorders. However, the results of these studies proved inconclusive. And then, due to the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, all research in all countries on all psychedelic compounds stopped. Decades went by, and these compounds, including the ones produced within, went unstudied. Only thanks to brave psychonauts like Dennis and Terence McKenna was the story of DMT kept alive.
Psychedelics, these were marginalized, these were ignored. DMT and 5-methoxy-DMT, they're not just about the visual experience. There's a huge emotional experience to it, and they induce ecstasy.
At the turn of the 1990s, Dr. Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico broke through that strict prohibition with the first human DMT studies as he injected nearly 400 doses into roughly 6 volunteers.
The design of the study was fairly straightforward: give people DMT and measure as many variables as possible. In the case of this study, which was going to be the first new psychedelic research in the U.S. really for over 20 years, I had to sort of anticipate a lot of objections that would come my way from the regulatory agencies that oversee this kind of research.
In the year 2000, Dr. Strassman published his findings in the book DMT, the Spirit Molecule. This book brought the topic of DMT to a mainstream audience outside of strict scientific circles. Dr. Strassman named DMT the Spirit Molecule based on the consistent reports of realer-than-real spiritual experiences from high-dose administration.
I started off seeing shapes, and then there were cats, and then I felt like I fell out of space and ended up at the Last Supper in heaven or something. I don't consider myself spiritual, and I'm going, why would my brain take me there? I was going through some emotional turmoil, and I didn't feel safe or welcome or like I had friends, and it just felt at the end like it was okay and I was loved.
A decade later, in 2010, the book became a documentary hosted by comedian and podcaster Joe Rogan, catapulting the discussion of DMT and ayahuasca onto an even bigger global stage, reaching tens of millions of viewers.
What is ayahuasca?
It's just like it's like a tree root. It's got DMT in it.
So for someone like me, the ayahuasca experience is essential. I need to be beaten down occasionally.
Did a really eye-opening experience of ayahuasca. It was really intense.
In his book, Dr. Strassman hypothesized that the pineal gland, a gland long associated with mysticism in Eastern traditions, is the source of DMT in the brain. But in 2013, Dr. Jimo Borjigan led a study at the University of Michigan, which finally proved that the pineal gland produces DMT and put all the speculation to rest. This study further increased the interest of DMT in pop culture.
You don't even need to seek DMT externally to you. No, Your pineal gland produces it.
My guests are terrified! Yes! And their brains are releasing adrenaline, dopamine, even dimethyltryptamine from the pineal gland!
But there was still speculation that we might only produce this mysterious compound at select moments of life, some of which only occur in a fraction of the population.
They've proven that their pineal gland is producing dimethyltryptamine, which is what it's always been anecdotal evidence. So now they know that it's not just produced by the liver and the lungs, but it's also produced by this little gland. And this little gland, they think during near-death experiences and during heavy REM sleep, it's producing DMT.
DMT is ubiquitous in the natural world. It's found in hundreds, if not thousands, of plants. Ones that are used for their psychoactivity and ones that aren't. Been found in every mammal that's been studied. I don't think DMT would have gotten anywhere near as popular during the first wave of clinical research if it weren't for the fact that it was endogenous.
As the public continued to show their interest in DMT with increasing internet searches, DMT began to hit the mainstream music scene.
And dimethyltryptamine, and I surge a gas without dynamite. The vibes are effervescent, delicious, just how they should be.
I done died and lived again on DMT, huh? See, this the type of high that won't come down. This the type of high.
Comedians began spreading the word about the experience.
DMT is like, hey, you know all of this reality and perception that you are super familiar with and very convinced is real? Well, sorry about this. Zip.
Everyone all of a sudden wanted to know, what in the world is DMT? And why do we produce this otherworldly compound in our brains?
Give people DMT and they all came back with the same story. I was blasted out of my consciousness.
What exactly does an LSD or DMT breakthrough feel like?
Even the lesser understood compound 5-MeO-DMT began hitting popular internet shows, touting its mystical experience of oneness with creation.
My experience with 5-MeO is a connection to all that is. I felt the direct connection to spirit, to soul, to my own soul.
Lesser known still is the fact that this compound too is found within humans. Just as the popularity of the DMT discussion seemed to be reaching its peak, it happened. Former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson decided to take the 5-MeO-DMT plunge.
My whole life totally changed. It sounds like a movie strip, a script, but it's really the real deal.
Following his 5-MeO-DMT experience, Tyson would discuss his transformation from an ego-driven ex-fighter into a spiritually transformed individual.
How does this happen to me? I'm not leading my ship. I'm not driving this fucking car, not me.
After Tyson made his 5-MeO-DMT use public in 2019, the interest in DMT reached an all-time high.